We learned a lot this year, and we learned thousands and thousands of years of Chinese history. There were tons of themes I could have done this video on. The possibilities were just limitless. But, doing the scroll and really reviewing what we learned this year, I think the thing that I pulled most from this year was the whole "is geography destiny" idea. And, we learned throughout Chinese history that becomes apparent that geography is in fact destiny. And I think this can be connected to many, many examples throughout Chinese history, old and new. So that's what I'm going to be presenting to you today, is my biggest take, and that is geography. Okay, so the first thing that comes up in Chinese history that we really find out that geography is in fact destiny is the Qin Dynasty. And we could connect this to the Qin Dynasty, but as far as we know, it's legend. So, and that is where the first Chinese civilization ended up living. And the thing about it is, because of the boundaries its geography set for it, when the China proper ending up right around here, they were isolated from all the other earlier civilizations. And and if these there's this huge what if question: if these boundaries weren't here, then would China be what would China be like today? Would they be more internationally? Oh no, in their history, would they be more internationally popular? Would their traditions be affected that we know today? So yeah, I think that the geography had a great deal on China's communication. And so first of all, the boundaries. And so we have Mongolia up here, and not only were the badass nomads up here, but also we have the Gobi Desert. So north, it's not a very suitable route, and above that, Siberia with its ice wasteland. Okay, and over to the west, we have the Taklamakan right around here. And not only do we have that, but southwest we have the Himalayas. And actually, I did this in my scroll. I did like a little compass, and it showed all the boundaries. So we have the Himalayas, and not only the Himalayas, but when we look at that elevation map we got at the beginning of the year, there's just huge, huge, huge elevation just right around here. So northwest China. So this whole way is blocked, and that was kind of like, especially with the production of the Silk Road, which we'll see later on, that was kind of that was hard to tackle. And when you have an early civilization with less traveling experience and international affair experience, you don't see that the Chinese make their way across that huge elevation path. Okay. So not only did the geography set forth some, blocks, but also the climate. And, we talked about the climate being good here, because there's the 14% arable land. Yeah, China only has 14% arable land. So we have arable land, a lot of it where China proper was, the Shang China proper. And we have hot, wet climate down here, which wasn't really suitable for the early civilization, because that becomes more suitable for Chinese civilizations like the Song and the Tang, who grow tea. So that'll become important later, but really for the first civilization on the China proper, it really wasn't a suitable place for their crops, because agriculture was huge for bringing up its civilization. And then, towards the north and into Manchuria and and Mongolia, it gets really cold and dry. So basically, this was the most suitable for. So in conclusion to early civilization China, it was most suitable to be along the China proper which isolated it from other early civilizations who were already experiencing large trade routes and just communication, culture swaps along trade. So China was isolated from all of this, and it really affected its future because it didn't find the West until thousands of years later, towards around the beginning of the Ming Dynasty, and definitely in the peak of it. So that's the conclusion for the Shang. So my next example is the Qin Dynasty, and there's so much you can learn in Qin Dynasty. There's so many essential questions you can get from the Qin Dynasty. But what I found really interesting was the Great Wall. And it's interesting because you have a situation where you created the biggest monument, Chinese, history, longest graveyard in the world, but you killed so many doing it. And that's what Qin Shi Huangdi's kind of, his character is questioned about. Is he a monster? Is he a hero? And I think if you apply geography into the context of that question, you would say, yeah, I think Qin Shi Huangdi had his reason for the Great Wall, because, we talked about it in the beginning, is up here north is the badass Mongols. And, when you're building such a strong imperial country, you don't want an invasion from the Mongols. And that kind of echoes into time, because we see later the end of the Song Dynasty is because of the badass Mongols, and the beginning of the Yuan Dynasty. So I think when you put it in context, the Great Wall, although it killed many, it was a huge need. Because China's geography puts it right next to this large nomadic tribe who shoots arrows accurately off of horseback and takes over, Eurasia and Asia eventually in the Yuan Dynasty. So I think it was very essential for geography, and the geography ended up taking many lives. So it was the destiny of those civilians who lost their lives in building this huge stretch of wall. And, geography is such a huge, important main detail in this dynasty, because, even though the Mongols didn't end up invading, Qin Shi Huangdi saw it as a pending threat. So on top of all of his projects, on top of his obsessive compulsion for living as long as he could, and the terracotta warriors, and just on top of all these projects, I think the Great Wall, because it was so geographically important, that it was his main accomplishment. And it would later be rebuilt, and I believe the Tong. I may be wrong on that, but I'm just kind of improvising that. But I do believe it was rebuilt in the Tong, or just added on to, because, no, Sui, because, on top of the Grand Canal and all that. So, in the context of Qin Shi Huangdi, he's not, when you put him next to the Great Wall, you may see two things. You may see, oh, he's a monster, look at how many lives he is taking. But then again, you realize, but the other take on it is, Qin Shi Huangdi, yes, he's killing many, many people, but he is doing something that will, first of all, keep badass Mongols any nomadic tribe, out of China, which is a very important thing for the Chinese, which will protect it many, many, many years, for many, many, many years. And then, today, the Great Wall of China brings in lots and lots of tourism money, but that has nothing to do with geography. I'm just saying, in conclusion, the Great Wall during the Qin Dynasty was excruciatingly important because its geography in bordering Mongolia with the nomadic tribes, the pending threat, the nomadic tribes up in the north, which it protected China from for thousands and thousands of years. So in that case, geography was definitely a destiny of the Qin people, the Qin Shi Huangdi, and China throughout the years. Okay, so this is the last dynasty I'm going to be talking about in this video, because at the end of this dynasty, it just it opened China up. It was kind of the official point of China. It's now internationally aware, and international lands are aware of China, and it's the Ming Dynasty. So not too far in history. No, it's yeah, the Ming Dynasty, kind of far from Qin Dynasty. So there was a period of development, and we did talk about it, and I read a little bit in the Sui Tong Song packet. I have a couple pieces of that from here because I used it on my timeline. But I was definitely reading it, and we did have brief contact in the Sui Tong Song 3 dynasties with the Silk Road, which was a huge briefly, little blimp right here. The Silk Road opened up trade routes which would eventually reach Rome. So the trade route, first of all, was a huge geographic need because it cut through that kind of right here, the large elevation, and it gave access to Western lands, and eventually, Buddhism would come in, and so many religious traits, and just it shaped China. And because geography gave China the need to build that road, it affected the people and the culture enormously. But again, now we're to the Ming Dynasty, and so the majority of my Ming Dynasty packets ended up in my scroll. So let me just give you a brief rundown. I mean, Mr. Brell's watching this, and if users don't know, I'll just give a brief rundown. The Ming Dynasty was huge. We have Zheng He sent on this huge expedition with a fleet 10 times the size of Da Gama's or Columbus's, like 100 times, not even, with ships with irrigation systems, ships with livestock and treasuries, and with the tribute system. China was getting a lot from these discoveries, and China was pulling in, okay, it's more of a you give me this, I'll give you this situation. So China, when it was especially in India and just exploring southern Asia, and eventually to Africa, I believe, it was just pulling in a lot of wealth. China was doing pretty good in this dynasty, but then we have contact with the West, and this was a huge deal, because we have the end of the Ming Dynasty, the end of exploration. They decided, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, because, sorry, I'm just looking through a couple of sheets right now trying to find it. Alright, it's not here, so I'll pull it from my knowledge. They shut the exploration off because they found many troubles with it, and it would become more apparent later on. But you're probably asking me right now, Abby, can you make your point? What does this have to do with geography? And the point is because of China's sudden industrial boom, with the brief interruption of Yuan, and its shipbuilding, it was able to scale that geographic boundary. It gave China, with the long stretch of Southeast Asia down, and the China Sea, the Japanese islands that kind of like was like, where do we go in this huge, vast ocean of ours, the China Sea? So they definitely stepped over that geographic boundary, and like the Qin Dynasty, you see, okay, you stepped over that boundary, but it will have its consequences. So, and that's eventually the contact with the West. And in the Qing Peak, we can see that, George III, and George III, the Opium War, the Second Opium War, all the rebellions that, trade with Western countries gave China, because you have the introduction of Christian missionaries in China, and this would have never happened if China wouldn't have stepped over that geographic boundary. Now, that can be challenged because it would probably have happened by now, because this was towards the end of the 1800s. So, although this contact was very late, even if it didn't happen, we would have Chinese, this would probably be happening right now. So, I think the boundary geography set could have been overcome either way, but it did set a boundary, and you have so many years of Chinese history without the effect of Western culture and history, and it gave China a foundation to stand on. Okay, these are our values still. Although we are being invaded by opium and Chinese missionaries and the influence of God, our traditions are still strong. And, tradition does go through this period of question, and communist regime and capitalist economic policy, but geography set China this traditional boundary, and it affected their lives in many, many ways. So yeah. So in conclusion, this really opened my eyes, because not only do I think this could be applied to Chinese history, this could be applied to Western history, and even though geography was a bit easier to overcome, how it shaped the history and the lives of its civilians and its traditions. So I think, but in China's case, geography was a boundary in some cases, a murderer in some cases, but also kind of a lifeline to China proper. And it was a gift. Geography gave you this perfect wet climate to get tea, silkworms. Silkworms only found in China. These are brief things brief little things that touch on my prompt, but they didn't happen over a span of a dynasty. So China, it was affected by its geography massively. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. Massively. So, in conclusion, doing this scroll since for a week and a half, and till 2 o'clock on Monday morning. Thursday morning. Having time to review this material, the thing that I took most was geography in China's case. This can be historically proven in modern terms. Geography is its destiny, and I will carry that throughout my life, applying it to every country. So thank you, Ms. Rel, for such an amazing year. I would like to blame this video being late on many things, but I'm not going to, because ultimately I sat down, I got it done, and I feel good about it. I feel like this was a strong point, and I was very passionate about it. And in the end, I had a great year. I learned so much. And I can't wait to continue with you, maybe in my writing course and impromptu. So I want to thank you so much, and I hope you have a great winter break, and I will see you next year. All right. Bye.